In a world where one man owns a 2020 Harley Davidson Lowrider S and also owns a 2020 Honda Grom, the two must be compared.
Riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a thing that you found. What's up? So yeah, we're going to talk about the differences, in my opinion, of the Honda Grom versus the Harley Lowrider S, both years 2020. Now, as you can imagine, obviously the size is quite different between the two of these bikes. You can really see that just on the angle of the GoPro. I mean, even though height-wise for your feet placement and like actually standing up on this bike doesn't feel super like clown-like, it doesn't feel like it's that incredibly low, just the size of the bike in general, I mean, the handlebars are way down, the front fairing area, everything is way down. It is a big difference compared to the Harley. But like I said in a couple other videos I have, I'm about 5'8", 190 to 200 pounds depending on the day, and this bike works fine for me ergonomic wise, so you're not going to have any issue of, you know, dealing with the size if you're a little bit of a like a medium to taller size person. I'd say once you start getting in the 6 foot and above range, you might have an issue with this bike. So this bike is obviously a lot bigger. Like you can see it, you know, just on the GoPro angle being on the top of the bars, just you're almost eye level with me versus me looking way down for the Grom. But also it's bigger as far as weight. It feels heavier, it feels bigger, it feels like it takes up more of the road, all that. It's also bigger as far as having to put your feet down when you're at a light and stuff like that as well. Second is going to be the issue of cost. Obviously, this is a way different amount for these two motorcycles. The Honda Grom came in at right around $4,000 after you were done with tax tags and everything from the dealer, and the Harley is upwards of at least 5 times that. But for obvious reasons, you do get more from the Harley. You have a lot more capability and everything, which I'll talk and touch on more in this video. Yeah, so this bike is way more expensive, but you do get a lot more. You know, agree to disagree as far as Harleys being overpriced. Everybody has their own opinion. I'm not talking about that. But just in this bike, this model, you were getting a lot more bike than the Grom. That's just a fact. And kind of going back to the size, you're also going to have the topic of comfort on the bike, and that kind of goes hand in hand with size. So part of the difference of the Lowrider versus this is that the Lowrider has a front fairing that kind of buffets most of the wind that comes up to you, where this does not. I mean, it does have a front fairing, but it's not even close to the same kind of style and the same kind of height. So you're going to get a lot more wind deflection in the Harley for higher speed cruising. And then in general, you just get a lot more wind hitting this, but it's also more of an upright to more of a leaning forward, if anything, kind of bike, where the Harley is more leaning back. So that wind, you don't feel it as much as like, you know, strain on your lower back and your arms as much as you would on the Harley without that front fairing. And even with the front fairing, you still feel it a little bit. Other than that, in terms of comfort, the seat on this bike, the Grom, I think is garbage. I think the stock seat on a Lowrider is decent, but nowhere near as good as an aftermarket seat like the one that I have on there. And then suspension-wise, even stock suspension on the Lowrider is light years better than this Grom, and that's, again, part of what you're paying for, is higher quality components. So the suspension on the Grom, I touched on it in my 100-mile review, like my initial review of the Grom, is absolute garbage. The suspension's terrible. So yeah, the fairing on this blocks a lot of wind. The wind stops from about here down. I don't get really any wind on my chest at all, mostly just on my helmet, which is how I like it. And the stock suspension on this bike is way better. You can have a couple of reasons why. One, the bike is heavier, so it absorbs stuff better. It absorbs stuff better to begin with. Two, just the suspension components that are put into this bike are in general just way better, and you know, that goes back to how much you're paying for it. So on both of these bikes, you're going to get a lot of a different speed factor, and I'm going to group speed and torque kind of in the same. Torque on the Harley, it's a V-twin. You got a lot of torque, especially compared to this Grom. I mean, the Grom is 125 cubic centimeters big. That is a very small engine. Granted, it's a small bike, and it's made for more around town and stuff like that, but it is very small, and you're not going to get a lot of torque from that. And high speeds, not going to happen with this. I've heard some guys just doing some air filter and exhaust modifications getting about a top speed of, you know, like mid to high 60s tops. I, with the stock Grom, have hit about 56, 57 miles an hour, and that's like really, really pushing it. And that is at full throttle, engine RPMs somewhat high, and then you've got to be like crouching down to get better aerodynamics as well. So obviously the speed is different between these two bikes. I mean, there's four gears on the Grom, and there's 6 on this bike, and this is a cruiser at heart, even though this is more of a performance cruiser, especially with what I've done to it, but it's still a cruiser. And they're made to just kind of eat up miles. So this will have no problem going highway and above speeds, and it will eat up anything you have at its speed and mileage wise. Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that price tag, being that they're so different, is just the feel of the overall bike and the craftsmanship. Now the Grom, it's from a big 4 company, it's from Honda, so you're not going to get, like, you know, any cheap, you know, Chinese knockoff parts where stuff is going to bend and it's just not going to be put together well. You're not going to get any of that. The fit and finish of this bike is fantastic, but you do have to allow for stuff like a sloppy gearbox, which this has, and I talked about it in my initial review. Just a very sloppy feel for shifting, but it's manageable. It's just not super convenient. And then anything else, like I said, the hand controls and everything else on this bike, even the clutch, besides the clutch plates, but that's an easy fix, the actual lever of the clutch and the engagement and everything, how the bike is set up, everything feels very high quality. No issues there. The bike itself, like I said, fit and finish, it's from Honda. It's going to be what you expect. So it's a Harley, you know, fit and finish. You're getting a Harley. Everything is really good on Harleys in my experience as far as fit and finish goes. Way more than any metric cruiser bike that I've ever had in the past. Just things don't tend to rust as easily. Things are just made with, in my experience, just slightly better hardware. As far as shifting goes on this bike, it is a very positive shift engagement. You can very much feel when you're going up and down through gears. You can very much feel when you're about to and go into neutral, and you can definitely tell when you're at the end, either at 1 or at the top end at 6th gear. That shifter just doesn't move. That lever just stays put. You can very much tell when you're done with the gears. Gas mileage is going to be way different, as you can imagine. You got about a 1-gallon tank on this Grom. And in my experience, I've gotten about 100 miles on this bike before I've had to fill up. Miles per tank kind of on this bike, you got about a 5-gallon tank, and I average between 250 to 300 miles per fill up, but you're probably going to get more if you're not on it quite as much as me. I tend to accelerate and brake a lot harder than, you know, you typically should. One of the very many joys of owning and riding a motorcycle is being able to customize your bike, not only for your taste, you know, turning it into exactly the kind of bike that you want to ride performance-wise, but also being able to change out the customization as far as aesthetics. You can change different colors of stuff, different upgrades, and different just aftermarket parts in general, just to change absolutely everything about most motorcycles. And obviously some motorcycles, be it the year, make, and or model, will have more or less of that aftermarket support than others. No surprises here. The Honda Grom has a huge following. Honda's a big name company. You have a lot of aftermarket support for this guy. And yeah, aftermarket for Harley, I mean, that's about as good as it gets. As much as there is out there for the Grom, I would bet a paycheck that the Harley has at least double, maybe triple that the aftermarket parts. I mean, there is multiple shops and companies that solely focus on Harley aftermarket parts and don't even do aftermarket for any other bike. And I only know maybe one that focuses on the Grom, and even them, they still do like stuff for the Honda Monkey, for the Honda Monkey, and then the Kawasaki Z125 as well. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is just how fun are these bikes? How much enjoyment are you going to get out of one of these suckers? And I am here to tell you, I love these bikes equally. I love them for different things. Now, you notice on this video, for the majority of the riding on the Grom, I'm in, very neighborhood, rural areas, slower speed limits, because one, that's where the Grom is comfortable. And two, that's where it's most fun to ride the Grom. It's not fun to go on a stretch of 45-mile-an-hour road or 55-mile-an-hour road, and you're going to be stretching the Grom out as high as it can go. It's not going to be fun. 30 miles an hour, 40 miles, I think, is where the Grom really shines, because on my Harley, on any other normal, like kind of bigger sized bike, 30, 40 miles an hour of just plain kind of straight roads, or even around like local stuff like this, just really sucks, and it gets really boring. On the Grom, it's so fun. You could dance around the lane, you just kind of sightsee at the same time, and you're just having fun because the bike is so light and nimble. And that's the main difference that I can tell between these two bikes. Obviously, performance and specs and everything like that aside, these are obviously two very different bikes for two very different reasons. But the biggest, as far as like enjoyment thing that I can tell you the difference is, in my opinion, is just where they're fun and how you have fun. The Harley is fun to go fast. It's fun to feel that torque. It's fun to just have fun taking off from a line quickly and hearing that V-twin rev. And this bike, it's fun being quiet. Nobody even bats an eye to you. You can ride local and no big issues. It's fun to get, very little acceleration out of it, because it really makes you work and plan for how you're going to take turns and corners and everything like that. And all that makes this bike super fun to ride at lower speeds and just around town. I have the most fun riding this bike maybe 5 to 10 miles away from my house typically. I love the Grom, but I gotta tell you, I really love the Harley too. It is so crazy. I just put the Grom back, and it is so crazy riding the Grom and then riding the Lowrider S back to back. They just, riding the Grom for a couple weeks like I had it before, and then getting on the Lowrider, this bike feels gigantic now. This must be what everybody feels like when they test ride a Harley for the first time and they come from either sport bikes or, smaller bikes or dual purpose even. The bike just feels incredibly heavy, incredibly big, and incredibly torquey. That's the best part. This bike is, like I talked about with the Grom, this bike is way more suitable for highway miles, just for having fun with the torque. Going 30, 40 miles an hour residential with this bike is boring, and it's not fun. You're not using even a 20th of what this bike is capable of. This bike wants to take turns, it wants to take twisties, it wants to be ridden hard, it wants you to feel the torque, it wants you to brake quickly, all that jazz. It wants you to ride it like a performance cruiser. A tight little turn here, yippee! So yeah, I enjoy these bikes way differently, completely different ways, but I love them both equally. They are both incredibly fun bikes for what they are made to do. If you try to take them out of their element, they are no longer fun, which is why I have two very different bikes like this, two very different styles of riding and what I want to do that day. And at the end of the day, if I had to pick one, just like, if you had to pick one of your kids, I couldn't do it. I'd find a way to have both of them, because I have fallen in love with the Grom in the very short amount of time that I've had it so far, and I have been head over heels with the Lowrider since I got it, and my love for this bike grows more and more every time I put a new aftermarket part on it, I do some maintenance on it, or I just take it out and I feel that torque and I hear the exhaust, and makes me love it more every day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I started it up with the Grom, so let me close it out with the Lowrider S. I had fun making it. It was cool riding the bikes back to back. I normally wouldn't do that. Normally one day I would just take the Grom out, and then this time I took the Lowrider out immediately after, and it was really cool to see just exactly how different they feel when you're immediately switching from bike to bike. I love both bikes. What can I say, guys? I have a lot of videos to come for a lot of build series stuff that I'm going to do with the Grom. So I would really like it and appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and turn on the post notifications so you could see all of that stuff as well. And for those of you who don't know who I am or what I do on the channel, like I said in the beginning, my name is Chris. I am the Riding Dad. And I post, like I said, install videos. I do review videos, stuff like this, just kind of a motovlog talking about stuff. And whatever else motorcycle related I feel like I can fit in for the content, I will. I do a little bit of everything, and I just love motorcycles. And if you did enjoy any part of this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. I'll let you guys enjoy yours. And this is a video YouTube thinks you're going to like, and right there is a video that I just recently uploaded. So go ahead and watch one or both of those. And until next time, guys, ride safe, have fun. Dad out.